Rising in one of the most hotly contested regions on the planet, the South China Sea.
It has seriously violated its sovereignty after Manila accused a Chinese Navy ship of...
It's 2022. A US P-8A Poseidon plane is conducting a reconnaissance mission near Chinese-held outposts on Spratly Island in the South China Sea, one of the most hotly contested regions in the world. At some 20,000 feet, US airmen flying the plane receive a radio message. U.S. military aircraft, this is the PLA Air Force. China has sovereignty over the Spratly Islands, as well as surrounding maritime areas. Stay away immediately to avoid misjudgment.
PLA Air Force, you are approaching Chinese airspace. Keep a safe distance or you'll be intercepted.
This message was sent from the pilot of a nearby Chinese Su-35 fighter. Despite warnings, the U.S. plane continued with its mission and replied, "I am a sovereign U.S. naval aircraft conducting lawful military activities beyond the national airspace of any coastal state. Exercising these rights is guaranteed by international law, and I operate with due regard to the rights and duties of all states."
I am a United States military aircraft conducting lawful military activities outside national airspace. I am operating with due regard as required under international law.
The two Associated Press journalists that were on board that day share that the tension was high during this brief but stern exchange. The probability of getting shot down or any warning shots was there. One shot fired, one misunderstanding or miscalculation could have sparked escalation to a new level with the United States and its allies, which would have meant World War. Thankfully, that day, China and the US chose not to follow that path, and instead chose restraint. However, incidents like this one demonstrate the tinderbox that is the South China Sea. China has always faced a dilemma when asserting its strategic and economic interests in the South China Sea, which is challenged by several regional and global powers. Instead, the country believes it has found a solution to this dilemma, building artificial islands to maintain its presence and legal claim on the South China Sea. As China continues to build artificial islands, the stakes are high, and the risk of conflict is more imminent than ever. You are watching Out There International, and today we will explore what is sparking so much tension in the South China Sea, China's man-made islands.
China is once again in the crosshairs. This time it is accused of building yet another artificial island in the disputed South China Sea.
But wait, what do you mean by China is building artificial islands? An artificial island is constructed by dumping natural substances like sand, rocks, and gravel. Islands like this could serve various functions, from deepwater ports or airports to the housing of nuclear power plants. As oceans and seas contain vast natural resources, states have begun constructing artificial islands to extend their land territory into the sea and gain easy access to such resources.
Manila accused a Chinese Navy ship of shadowing and trying to block a Philippine naval vessel.
Countries have fought over territory in the South China Sea for centuries, but tension has grown in recent years. The sea is encircled by 6 nations: China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and even Brunei. China asserts sweeping claims over land and adjacent waters in the South China Sea. Other countries also have claims on islands and various zones in the sea, such as the Paracels and the Spratlys. China resorts to island building and engages in naval patrols and naval exercises to back its claims. The US, in turn, sends military ships and planes near disputed islands in what it calls freedom of navigation operations. Japan also provides boats and military equipment to claimants like Vietnam and the Philippines. The South China Sea is an important trade route, and this vital maritime passageway goes back to ancient times. It came to be known as the Maritime Silk Road during the Tang Dynasty. Chinese merchants crossed the sea, bringing spices, silk, porcelain, and other precious products to far-off places. Along with connecting China to the outside world, this maritime route promoted cultural exchanges between nations, bringing information, creativity, and ideas. There are fears that the area will become a flashpoint, with potentially severe consequences for the world.
flare-up in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. China and Vietnam have traded bombs over the movement of a Chinese research ship and 5 escort vessels.
The most severe flare-ups in recent decades have occurred between Vietnam and China, and standoffs have also happened between the Philippines and China. Let's review a timeline of significant standoffs between the three countries in the South China Sea. It's 1974. China seizes the Paracel Islands from Vietnam, killing more than 100 Vietnamese troops. 1988, China and Vietnam clash in the Spratlys, and after 2 days of intense fighting, Vietnam loses more than 60 sailors. In 2012, China and the Philippines engaged in a lengthy maritime standoff near Scarborough Shoal. Later that same year, Vietnam accuses the Chinese Navy of cutting a seismic cable, effectively sabotaging a joint Vietnamese and Indian oil and gas exploration. 2014. After China moves an oil rig into waters near the Paracel Islands, an intense standoff between Chinese and Vietnamese navies ensues, resulting in the sinking of one Vietnamese vessel. 2023 and 2024. The Philippines claims Chinese vessels are shining lasers at Filipino boats and sailing too close, at times blocking the Filipinos' path. This standoff results in a Chinese ship bumping a Philippine Coast Guard patrol vessel. China claims the most significant portion of territory in an area demarcated by its so-called 9-dash line. The line comprises 9 dashes and effectively extends hundreds of miles. In 1947, China issued a map detailing its claims. It says its right to the area goes back centuries to when the Paracel and Spratly Island chains were regarded as integral parts of the Chinese nation. Interestingly, Taiwan makes the same claims. However, critics say China has not been specific about what exactly its claim includes. Historically, China has not had exclusive use over the area either. The 9-dash line that appears on Chinese maps encompassing almost the entirety of the South China Sea includes no coordinates. It is also unclear whether China claims only land territory within the 9-dash line or all the maritime space within it. Is China's ambiguous claim on these islands merely a guise to assert greater control over the sea? Why is China so interested in these tiny islands that it is willing to ignore international law? The answer: it's all about military and economic interests. According to recent surveys by the United States, the South China Sea is estimated to contain over 195 cubic feet of natural gas and 12 billion barrels of crude oil. Fish from the South China Sea remain a primary food source for China. In 2021 alone, China accounted for 40% of all fish and seafood production worldwide and generated more than $80 million in revenue. Obtaining additional fisheries will help feed China's ever-growing population. For China, 100 billion barrels of hydrocarbon reserves is another point of attraction. No wonder China has undertaken extensive deep-sea exploration projects in the sea. Oil and natural gas are essential to fueling China's ever-expanding manufacturing sector and consumer economy. Between 2022 and 2028, China is expected to add 1.5 million barrels per day in additional refining capacity, the most of any country globally. The sea is not only a bed of vast natural resources, but also a major maritime passage with a substantial amount of global trade traffic. The annual shipping traffic passing through the South China Sea accounts for more than 60% of global maritime trade, more than 22% of total global trade, and 1/3 of global shipping. According to the International Energy Agency, the area plays an essential role in Japanese and Chinese oil imports, with an estimated 90% and 80% of their oil, respectively, passing through this sea. Gaining influence in the South China Sea allows China to project economic and strategic power. While China claims that these man-made islands would assist the freedom of navigation, its military installations on these territories suggest otherwise. According to satellite images from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, runways and radars are being built on these islands. The goal is clear. China is ramping up its maritime surveillance and mobile missile operations. China has fully militarized at least 3 of several islands it built in the sea, arming them with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems, laser and jamming equipment, and fighter jets. The buildup would also strengthen China's operations in the event of war with the United States. The United States vow to protect Taiwan, puts China under tremendous pressure from US surveillance. Along with Taiwan, the US also has security guarantees for the Philippines. China, in turn, aims to upgrade its military influence through the construction of artificial islands. In July 2023, after an annual Association of Southeast Asian Nations meeting, diplomats from China and the US followed their well-rehearsed scripts on Southeast Asia, each attempting to convince Southeast Asian states that they intend to keep a distance between themselves. The South China Sea is a major bone of contention between two superpowers, and the tension is best exemplified by the account of two Associated Press journalists who were invited aboard an aerial US surveillance mission over the sea. As a result of the military buildup on these artificial islands, any military and civilian plane flying over the South China Sea could quickly fall within range of the Chinese island's missile system. A single missile fired would lead to full-blown war. The stakes are definitely high. We've discussed China's moves and the buildup of artificial islands, but is this legal? And can building an artificial island effectively permit a country to gain control over what would otherwise be international waters? According to Article 121 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, China's artificial islands would not qualify as islands. According to this section, an island, for purposes of asserting territorial claims over water, is a naturally established land area above the high tide of the surrounding water. This excludes artificial islands in light of their construction by a nation or government. China's artificial reefs are thus incompatible with the requirements of the UN articles. Legally, any state can construct an artificial island in its exclusive economic zone under Section 60 of the UN articles. However, military activity within another country's economic zone cannot be exercised or claimed. Another legal stipulation that makes China's artificial islands illegal is that they can be made within a state's exclusive economic zone, so long as they are within 200 miles of its coastal baseline. China's artificial islands go well beyond that distance. But does China care about international law? Absolutely not. China has always criticized international maritime law as a tool created by the West to consolidate dominance on the seas and oceans. The South China Sea has the potential to become the next battleground, as an escalation of the conflict would involve several states. If the US and China were to ever face off directly, there would be a world war. China, fueled by its military spending and global power ambitions, will continue its expansion activities in the South China Sea. The US, on the other hand, will maintain its military presence in the sea, driven to protect its unipolar status. Only time will tell who will be the master of the South China Sea. The world must pay attention before the issue turns from a low-intensity conflict into a full-blown war. So, what do you think? Are tensions in the South China Sea overblown, or are we overlooking the global impact of this region? Be sure to leave a comment below. I've been your host for Out There International. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel to be alerted when we release more content.